Hey everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video I'm going to talk about the SR7000 from a company that I've always called Aune, but after reading some comments and someone asked the company how do you pronounce it in English, and they suggested Aune, O-W-N. So I've always, by force of habit, called this Aune, just because when I read it, that's where my head goes. But this is, according to them, the Aune SR7000. Now, the SR7000 is a closeback, and it might look similar to another headphone that I've reviewed and very often discussed, the AR5000, because for $300, I think this is an absolutely smoking headphone, being an open back and having the sound performance that it does, great for gaming, comfort, build quality, all of that stuff. So I was excited that they were coming out with a closeback version, because as long as the sound characteristics are good enough, again, I still liked the build quality, and I was like, man, they could really do something special here. And I think there are great things about this headphone. The only issue I have is the price, so I'm going to get right into that. It's literally double the price of the open back. Now, is it better in certain areas? Yes. And I'm going to be comparing against other headphones that are closed back in a wide variety of prices, so you can kind of see how it stacks up to that. As well as the open acoustic version, the AR5000, because I don't want to just say, oh, I think this is expensive, because that's not my decision, that's yours. It is a wonderful headphone, and when you start comparing it to other expensive headphones, it does go to toe-to-toe with them rather well. So I want to start with what's included in the box, because just like the AR5000, you get a wonderful case. Like, this is a super high quality case, so naturally accessories are something to consider. You open it up and it is molded, and it has a really nice, like, soft velour feeling, and then this little pocket here so you can stuff the cables inside. It comes with a single set of pads, and they are mounted to it. I'll talk about the pads in a moment, but both cables do fit inside just fine. The unbalanced cable is this, like, almost like a shoelace material cable. It's rather long, and it comes with the 1/4 inch or 6.3 millimeter adapter, and then dual 3.5 millimeter, which is great, because that's the same thing that the AR5000 uses. Now, this is an OFC cable. The balanced cable, is an OCC cable, which is a really high quality copper. It's 4.4 millimeter Pentacon connection. And I'm gonna just straight up say, this isn't going to drastically change your sound quality. It's literally just, do you want balanced or unbalanced? And it's nice that they include both. The quality, the build quality is excellent. And the thing I noticed the most is this has zero microphonics issues. Anytime you have a fabric coated cable, there are some microphonics. However, between the way they angle the cable, because when you look at the bottom of the cups, these 3.5 millimeter terminals are angled forward, that helps push it off your shoulder. And I tried creating as much microphonics noise as I can, leaning back, turning my head. It is minimal, like really, really good, very low microphonic performance. It's just that the balanced cable is a little bit better. Now, some people might think the balanced cable might sound better, and that's only because a lot of amps get louder when you're in balance mode. So you might be noticing an amplitude change. And once you factor that in and match your volume, I think the performance is the same. So let's get into build quality and comfort, because to me, this is a huge factor on why you pay more for the SR7000 compared to some other headphone options out there. This is an exceptional design. I love what they did with this chassis. It's everything I liked about the AR5000. You have a really robust, solid feeling hinge. There's no odd flex here. And from a comfort standpoint, because you have this much articulation, it's going to fit a huge variety of heads with no issue. The sizing system is also really nice, because you have this really good suspension strap here. You can see there's enough clearance where it's not hitting the metal band, and then you can see how this slides up. That is how you size it. This fits huge heads, no problem, and it still gets small enough to fit my head, which is not a larger head by any means. The clamp force is rather light as well. So I actually had a lighter clamp force than many other closebacks I typically review in this price range. The difference is, I mean, I'm wearing a hat right now, but if I shake my head, this does kind of wiggle just a little bit. I could still look down and it won't fall off, but it's really close to feeling like it could fall off. So if you want something that feels more secure, just keep that in mind. Sennheiser typically has a stronger clamp force with the HD620S, as well as, Focal for the Azuris, which I'll talk about later. The FIO FT1 is looser, just like this as well. So it's not always apples to apples, but I did want to call out clamp force. Ear cup comfort is great, because these are huge, marshmallowy, pillowy ear cups, and you get that insanely angled driver in there. That's kind of like the signature design aspect of Aune headphones because the AR5000 had the same idea. Now they call this the tilted acoustic matrix, and I don't really dwell on the marketing terms as much because at the end of the day I just want to describe how an owner would experience it. And you can see that there's a different, if I can somehow expose this, the SR7000 is the one on my right and the AR5000 is the one on the left. It has a different ear pad design. This has like you know, a sport fabric material. It's a little bit more gel-like. This is a little bit stiffer because it's a closed back, so you need different pad compliance. This is designed to be a little bit more leaky, a little bit more breathable, whereas on a closed back, you have more sound isolation. Now, this is comparable sound isolation to the FIO FT1, and it's better sound isolation than the Focal Azuris. The Sennheiser HD620 still has the strongest passive sound isolation I've noticed, which means when you put it on, that one has the most reduction of environmental sound. This is still quite good. I will say though that when you factor in comfort, this is an amazing balance of both. It feels weightless on the top of my head. This is a rather light headphone. It's not the lightest closed back, especially when you compare it to products like from Sennheiser or Sony, but I don't feel like it's unwieldy on my head. And when you look at the large padded angled ear cups, my ears have plenty of room. As far as the dimensions go, they can fit rather large ears, and there is a taper here. The front is a shorter, I think it's close to 14 millimeters, and then it gets just over 30 millimeters in the back. So there's a lot of clearance here for a wide variety of heads. Now I will touch on build quality just briefly, because here's the thing. Like I know that some people have talked about or commented on the FIO FT1 having an issue with the hinge. I mentioned that mine kind of stuck and it felt weird, and it's broken in now. I haven't had any physical issues with mine, but I've never had issues or heard of anyone having issues with the AR5000 from a build quality perspective. So this is still a great headphone. It's literally a quarter of the price, so the value is still excellent, but I definitely noticed that the build quality of the Aune headphone line seems to be pretty exceptional. I've never had an issue where, you know, terminals get loose, there's squeaks, there's rattles. It's just super, super solid. And that definitely is something you're paying for with this headphone. Now, as far as glasses comfort goes, I do want to touch on this because this has a slightly lighter clamp force. It is good for glasses. Some closed backs can be a little bit too clampy. In particular, like the Biodynamic DT770 Mark II, which I'll also be talking about. That one has a stronger clamp and slightly less compliant pads, and as a result puts more pressure on the temples of your glasses, which squeezes into your head. I think the Aune SR, or Aune, I told you I would do that, the Aune SR7000 and the FIO FT1 seem to be a little bit better suited for those who wear glasses for long periods of time and where clamp force and pad softness are really important. Now, the SR7000 uses a unique driver. It's not the same driver as the AR5000. This isn't just a closed back version of that headphone, and they had different graphics online that showed physically the driver looking different. I also measured the electrical impedance, and it's very, very flat with this. It's rated at 55 ohms, and it's close to it on my measurement with no major peaks, which means if you have a high output impedance amplifier, such as an OTL, don't expect that to change the frequency response performance of the headphone. I like seeing this. This is a more consistent sound performance, and it's not so much amp dependent. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, when it comes to sound quality, I like to cover this in two parts, and starting with the objective side, which is measurement based, and then follow up with the subjective, which is my opinion, understandings, personal preferences, etc. So on the objective side, I use a Gross KB006X Pentaclone with an IC711 coupler. And I try to mention this in every review because I don't want to hide that. It's such an important thing to understand that different ear simulators or PINAs will change the frequency response measurement, as does testing methodology and other variances. Even the microphone coupler itself might have a different acoustic impedance. And all of these things can change frequency response measurements. I use the same testing procedure for all of my headphones. So if you want to see how my measurements compare to each other, I'll have a link in the description below. So you compare this to the AR5000, for example, or other closed backs. So when we look at the frequency response of the SR7000, there's a lot to like here. I do like the way this measures, although it's not perfect. There is a bit of a bass shelf, and when you compare it to the AR5000, you can see everything below 200 hertz, it starts to emphasize a little bit more strongly, especially when you look at sub bass. So if you're looking at bass performance under 40 hertz, you can see a much wider disparity between the two. Mid-range performance is excellent between both of these, and there is a little bit of a difference on the SR7000 where you have a slight boost in the 1000 to 1500 hertz area. This is an area that some people weren't a super fan of on the AR5000. Now, I loved the sound tuning and frequency response of the AR5000, so I'm not trying to take away from that. It really has a natural wide stage because of that little scoop, kind of like what HiFiMan does and some other headphone models lately. This is a little bit more direct, and I will load the FiiO FT1 for comparison shortly. The big difference with the SR5000, now if you own the AR5000 and you love it and you're like, I want a closed back version, this is the biggest difference. It's actually not the bass, it's the low treble, like the whole pinna gain region of 3 to 5,000 hertz. Obviously, when you look at 4,000 hertz, there is a huge difference here. And if I load the inspector, you know, we're looking at close to 10 decibels of a difference in certain areas, which is quite drastic. And what happens is when you compare the two, the SR7000 is a safe tune. When you don't have this area overly boosted, it typically, in my personal experience, again, this isn't like what I say is 100% the standard, you know, like everyone's going to have their own opinions of this. But from my large amount of testing, what I've noticed is when you have headphones that have more emphasis at 4,000 hertz, there's a wider variety of people's opinions on if they like that sound signature a lot, because your own pinna amplifies these areas slightly differently than others. That's also a huge area of variance for different measurement rigs. You might hear this differently here. And if you have one that's too emphasized in this region, it might come across as too bright, maybe shouty, harsh sounding to some. This being relaxed has a safe approach. I don't think it's going to offend any people, but the one downside to having this much of a recess, both on my rig and how I heard it, is it may not come across as detailed as it actually is. Now you can boost these frequencies and now it will sound more resolving. But if you get this and you find that it sounds dark to you or you're missing details and you have to turn it up, it alters the overall frequency response of the headphone when this area is reduced. So if it sounds less detailed, it's because of this. Now, when you look at the higher frequencies in the upper treble region, the treble extension is excellent and it's comparable to the AR5000. What happens with this guy is it sounds really wide and very immersive because of this type of tuning, and I'll get into the subjective side as well. Now, I do want to show you channel matching, so I'm going to split this up. Channel matching is excellent as well. This is a very important thing to consider with a closed back because there can be more variances here. This is a rather tight channel match considering it's a closed back, because this varies greatly in sound performance based off positioning on your head. It's the same thing I had with the Focal Azurus, where if you slide it backwards, it boosts the pinna area anywhere from 2 to 5,000 hertz. I find that it makes that area stronger just by shifting this back. If conversely, if I push this forward, it gets much darker and it makes the bass sound stronger. Now, I don't usually believe in doing that to kind of cheat the frequency response. You should just put it on your head as it naturally sits and feels comfortable to you, and that's close to how I set it up on the rig. So if you position it this far back and it seems bright to you, maybe just kick it forward a little bit, and that might be the adjustment you're looking for if you're not considering EQ. Now, the big one I wanted to talk about was the FiiO FT1, because it's been making waves lately. And when you look at the frequency response of the FT1, it's pretty damn good. I'm not going to shy away from this, and I will be talking about this later in the review. Now, Aune, they did send this to me for review. It doesn't affect what I say about it ever. I have no monetary kickbacks with them, and I have no special affiliate or marketing things. I don't do it for that. The FiiO FT1 on paper, and when you listen to it, is an excellent performer, and the value is just absurd. It has a little bit more sub bass, as you can see, but there is a little bit more of an emphasis in the 2,000 hertz area. And this has really been the only point of contention for the FT1 because it can come across a little bit shouty. I don't mind this higher emphasis here in the 4 to 5K region. Sounds very detailed. I think it sounds great, especially for the price, but I did want to show you how it stacks up frequency response wise to the SR7000. So transitioning over to subjective sound quality, I kind of alluded on some of these, but I want to tie some of this in. So this is a safe frequency response tuning. It doesn't do anything, to me, exemplary, but it also doesn't do anything offensive. There's no sign of sibilance anywhere. There's no harshness. There's no shoutiness, and there's no, overly boosted bass, making it sound far too strong. And it's also not lacking in the bass department where it sounds anemic. So that's a good start. Now this has this dragon scale style acoustic system inside. to help with reverbs and resonances of the chassis. That is noticeable. One thing that stood out to me is it doesn't sound exactly like a closeback when it comes to reflections and that typical ear cup resonance sound. If you have an open back headphone and you put your hands like this, you can hear a change in tuning. It has that extra reflection from back waves. And they did an excellent job of essentially eliminating that with this. The only thing I notice is it doesn't sound as like loose or dynamic or punchy as some other headphones do, even in some cases for less money. Now, it has more sub bass than this, but not as much as I would have liked for a closeback personally. It's weird where it doesn't sound like it has a ton of bass, but it also sounds a little bit thick sounding to me. Because the bass carries into the upper bass, low mid region, it sounds just slightly thick, and it's almost, it's really not my ideal bass performance, if I am to be blunt. And I like a lot of things about this headphone. The bass performance isn't necessarily one of them. It sounds just a little bit lacking in terms of dynamics and punch, but it's still clean. Now, you can EQ some of this. I also found that it doesn't like a strong bass shelf. So if you're a bass head, I would consider something like the Beyerdynamic DT770 Mark II or the Sony MDR MV1. Those are bass cannons. Even the FIO FT1 has a more impactful bass response. So I don't want to say that as like a game breaker or anything. It's just a leaner, warmer sounding bass. It's a little bit thick, but not as strong. Now the mid-range is fantastic. It's very, very clean. I have no coloration of voices. What happens is because the pinna gain region is more relaxed, I just find that some vocals step back a little bit. If you like your vocals to be very present and very forward in the mix, if you like certain guitars to be very forward in the mix, then you would look at the FIO FT1 or the Focal Azurus, which place much more emphasis in those frequencies and shifts that further forward. Now, the issue with those, I'll do more of the comparisons later, is there are other downsides to that, and whether it be sibilance or certain tracks being overly harsh. I mentioned this being a safe tune, and it really is. Because it's not overly resolving or sharp, you can play any genre on it. I think the magic really happens in the high treble. It has a wonderful balance of sounding extremely vast and wide, but not overly disconnected from more of the precise placement of audio cues. If you're concerned with like imaging performance, whether it's a live performance or some mix, like a song you're listening to that was produced to have a really vast, fun, engaging sounding track, something with really good imaging and separation. This does a wonderful job at that without blasting you with treble to achieve this wide soundstage. I think the magic trick of the SR7000 is the imaging and width. It's truly wonderful, and that does translate into gaming and movie listening as well. Anything that has to do with environmental noise, vast soundscapes, etc., these things absolutely excel at, and I think they're the best in this category under $1,000. Now, I did EQ the pinna region up a little bit, and that brought a lot of the detail I felt I would have wanted for certain tracks. And if you're okay with EQ, then these become a much more exceptional headphone, as long as you're not chasing a strong amount of bass. They can hit enough where I feel like I don't necessarily have to chase more bass, but the mid-range all the way up to the high treble is fantastic with just some mild EQ in the pinna regions. A real wide, let's say 4,000 hertz lift for a few decibels. It doesn't take much, and now they sound much more detailed. Even with that darker sound signature, they do present layers of instruments really well. I find them very technical and nuanced, but they just come across as a dark sounding headphone. Now, when it comes to gaming performance, there are a lot of comparisons I'm going to make to other headphones, so I'm kind of combining both gaming and versus others here. If you don't care about the gaming side, I'm sorry, and I'll do my best to make it concise. So the SR7000, where this shines and where I mentioned the whole soundstage and vastness, this is one of my favorites I've used in this price range. And when you're looking at closebacks, the vastness that it has for environmental sounds, if you're playing an open world game especially, these are absolutely incredible, because not only is the sound signature very relaxing and wide and immersive, but the headphone's physically comfortable as well. A lot of people that play games, you're not just putting the headphone on for 20 minutes at a time. Some people go for several hours, so comfort becomes a massive factor with a headphone. And this has a great balance of acoustic comfort and physical comfort. So I really like the way those are tuned. Now, when it comes purely for FPS performance, these are excellent because it makes FPS gaming more enjoyable because of the vastness. You really feel like you're in the environment more. So there is an edge to the enjoyment factor. There is not an edge purely on the FPS side for footstep tracking and audio cues over some of these others here. If you're just looking for best bang for your buck and these types of headphones, like the higher end closed back headphones, don't feel like this is going to give you a competitive edge. It's comparable. Now, when you compare it to the FiiO FT1 isn't as physically comfortable. It is a quarter of the price though, and I love the bass of the FT1. I think that's its selling point. Overall, the sound tuning, I think for a lot of people, they might actually like this more because it has a more excited sound. The bass is stronger, more impactful, and then you have more energy in that whole pinner region. So a lot of people will see as this sounding like a more detailed, engaging headphone. When it comes to FPS performance, I'm fine with it. It's like, it sounds right, it sounds good, but it didn't do anything special for me. It's not like a game changer in FPS gaming, but it still performs really well. It was just as competitive as this, but it didn't sound as immersive, and I didn't feel like I was gaining or losing a competitive edge with it, if that makes sense. So really fun listen. Purely on the gaming side, every now and then that shoutiness at 2K exposes itself. It really depends on the vocal that you're listening to, especially if it's a more forward vocal, like that has a stronger bite in that frequency. Like a harsher male vocal, for example, it is a little unpleasant sometimes with the FT1, but it's minor. And I think the bass performance and overall value of this is excellent. Now, when you look at the Azuris, the more I've listened to the Azuris, I've actually started liking it less. And this has a very different sound presentation than the SR7000. Everything is more immediate. I find that there's more coloration with the Azuris, and in many cases in a negative way. I actually didn't like the shift that it has in tonality because it actually, like the lift that you typically get closer to 2500 to 3000 hertz, that's not as strong and everything's kind of shifted right, but there's also still more emphasis in the lower treble, like upper mid-range, low treble. So it has a unique sound signature. I don't think it sounds as natural to me. It's gorgeous. Styling is a subjective thing, of course, but I think it's really well made. It is comfortable, and these pads, although they might sound a little bit scratchy, they are very breathable, and I did like it as well. It also has the same placement variance that I had with the SR7000 for changing frequency response. This is one of the least consistent measuring headphones I've used, but it's not bad. I didn't like it as much as an overall like single purchase when I started listening to more of these headphones here. Now, the DT770 Mark II, the Pro Mark II. I haven't fully reviewed this yet, but this review is coming. This is a weird headphone to explain because the clamp force is stronger. These ear pads have a wonderful skin feel on them, but they're not as deep, so your cartilage, like your actual ear, touches and kisses the baffle just a little bit. Thankfully, this is padded. Clamp force is a little bit stronger. I like this cutout up top. It helps relieve pressure. And it doesn't have it uses a single mini XLR connection. The bass of this is noticeably stronger, and there's a mud cut that happens just over 200 hertz to make it so it doesn't sound as thick. So these do have a much stronger bass profile, and I found that the overall delivery of the bass was quite nice. I think the FT1 might have the most resolving bass, but this is still a really fun listen to, especially if you like more bass with rock music. These are a blast. I actually like the mid-range tuning on this as well, having a good blend of putting vocals forward enough in the mix. Things don't sound unnatural. The only gotcha with this guy is it still has that 8000 hertz treble spike. And if you can't EQ that, if you don't have the ability to EQ a narrow peak like that, that sibilance can really sneak up on you with certain tracks. Whenever I play sibilant tracks to kind of expose that, it's not that pleasant on this. Whereas when that's not the case, if I'm listening to EDM or hip hop or playing games, that is less of an issue for me, and it's much more enjoyable there. So you kind of have a really good performer here for the money, but there's a couple little gotchas in there that might sneak up on you, which may be unpleasant for some. And then, of course, you have the AR5000. I've talked about this headphone so much. It's just as comfortable as the SR7000, if not more, because the pads are more breathable. Still extremely light. It's been my go-to for FPS gaming. Now both of these, the SR7000 and the FIO FT1 actually, as I grab multiple cords here. So the FIO FT1 and both Aune or Aune headphones have dual 3.5 millimeter connections. And what's cool about that is I can plug in this Meze boom mic. If you're looking for like a flagship gaming headset, or you want something that's great for music during the day while you work and have a good microphone for work, you can plug this microphone in on all of them, get volume control and a mute switch. It's just an awesome, awesome experience. So I think there's an edge with headphones that have dual 3.5 millimeter like this for this type of microphone solution. You can use the Antlion mod mics. The V-Moda mic boom for this guy will work. The Boom Pro, I think it's called. That's a single 3.5 millimeter connection setup. So here's the thing. At the end of the day, where this falls is tricky. The big kicker here is value. That's what's going to determine if this is the right headphone for you or not. It's not my job to sell the latest headphone every single time as the best under the sun. This is a worthy contribution in the sub-$1,000 closeback space, and the more I listened to it, the more I appreciated it. I think the FIO FT1 has an edge in value and overall bass tactility if that's what you're chasing. It's a wonderful option. But the SR7000 has one of the best executed sound stages of a closeback I've heard. It's not doing it to an effect to kind of cheat you out of other areas. Like the HD620S is a wonderful headphone, good passive noise isolation. I didn't bring it out because there's just too many to talk about. And it has good sound stage, but it's doing that partly by altering other frequency responses to make it sound wider. This just naturally sounds wider without having as much coloration in the mid-range. So that is an exceptional feat. If soundstage, imaging, and vastness are an important thing to you, the SR7000 just kills it in this area, in addition to being very comfortable physically and having that relaxed sound signature. If you want something brighter, more resolving, more impactful, that's where some other headphones come in, and obviously you kind of pick of, you know, what has a better value to you. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next one. Thank you so much for making it to the end, and I will see you next time. Bye.